Hello guys, welcome to Law Minds. So in this video we are going to talk about the natural school of law. So what do you understand by the concept of schools in jurisprudence? So schools means when people of similar thinking who have been studied together or who have almost similar ideas and theories are clubbed together and they are categorized into schools. So today in this video we will be dealing with the natural school of law. So what is a natural school of law? The natural law is being derived from the Roman term jus natural, which means the system of law based on the fundamental ideas of right or wrong. And the exponent of natural law school are also known as naturalist. Natural law is unwritten body which embodies in it the universal moral principle that underline the ethical law, legal norms by human conduct is evaluated by which the human conduct is evaluated and governed. So it means that it is an underlying concept of all the the goods and bads are there in a human being. Okay, so this concept is being embodied in a human being, and by this the naturalist of this school I have tried to interpret the law. Now you can see that natural school of law is the law which is universal and common to all humanity. It means the law which is universal and which never changes with time and with society, with anything. It becomes eternal, it remains eternal, and it never changes with time. Natural law is also known as higher law or the law of nature, which has been continually dominating the entire basis of society through politics, law, religion, and social philosophy. Now, we will look the definition of natural law school with the view of different jurists. First of all, we will talk about the Friedman's view. In natural law, Friedman has said that natural law is the tale of the search of mankind for absolute justice and its failure. So, natural law is a tale. By tale means it is a story of a research through which we are searching the absolute justice and the failure of it. Stoics means Stoic says that natural law means divine law. Divine law means the law which has given to us by the God, and like he has imposed this law. He has not just given it to us, but he has imposed this law on all the human beings. Now, according to Cicero is also a naturalist of natural law school. We'll be dealing with Cicero, Aristotle, St. Thomas Aquinas. So according to Cicero, natural law is the law of reason as being established by a reason by which the world is governed and addressed by nature of man. It means that natural law is the law to establish हुआ है because of a reason, right? And it is being governed and addressed by the nature of the man. And there is a reason behind the establishment of natural law. Now, according to Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas, they define the law as an audience of the reason for the common God made by him who has the care of the community. So it is a audience. It is a rule. It is something which it is a scripture which has been made. Scripture is a term. I am not using it in the regard of a history, but I am using it in it's like that it is a book. It is something that is written by the God for a community through which we can govern a community. According to Hooks, it is an eternal law. It is an eternal law as having existed from the commencement of the world, whereas for the justice modern times, natural law consists mainly the principle of morality. So it is a very important essence of natural law that it contains the principles of morality. We are talking about the goods and bads in a human being. So what is the good and bad in a human being? It is the moral, it is the morality. So that's what we are talking about the natural law. Now natural law is categorized into four parts. First is ancient and classical period, medieval period, renaissance period, and modern period. Now ancient period starts from 2000 to 25,000 years ago, and there were three main exponents of this ancient period who were Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Plato haven't said anything new, but he interpreted what Socrates have said. So according to Socrates, every human being have a virtue in it, the concept of good or bad, which made inside him by the God. Like a man can make a distinction between what is good and what is bad. Similarly, with this concise, a man can interpret the law. Socrates had propounded the Socratic method, in which he asked the people to interpret the law according to themselves and then find the loopholes in it. Like when researchers make a hypothesis, for example, I want to make you understand this with the help of an example. So, like researchers makes hypothesis, then it themselves criticize it, the earlier hypothesis, and they try to find out all the loopholes, and ultimately in the end they reaches the best results. That's what Socrates wants from the law thinker. But as we all know that it was a dilemma of all the time. When someone brings up something new, he is always being secluded or separated from that society. Similarly, in 399 BC, Socrates was given a death sentence for corrupting the young and believing into strange gods, which means that he is corrupting the youth by teaching them the critical thinking. So he consumed poison and died. Nevertheless, let's move on to Plato. Plato wrote about Socrates because Socrates was an infamous exponent, so he separated his ideas and made him the famous personality which he is today. Plato was a student of Socrates, and he also gave his own theory, the doctrine of forms, and he said that the doctrine of forms are transcended archetypes that exist independently of physical world, independently of space and time. So as I have told you earlier, that natural law is all about the immutable law, eternal truth, and it never changes with time and society involves. So he gives archetypes that will exist and are independent of time and world and society. This concept, there were certain ideal things that exist in the world. He also believed that there are certain ideal things that exist in the world, and he emphasized on the concept of idealism. And he also believed that the concept of goodness by the virtue is immutable and it never changes with human being. And human being is supposed to find out that like these laws and these goodness and virtue are, human being is the one who is supposed to find out all these things. The time With the time, the human being is supposed to find them out, and it has been given to all the human beings, and it is like a sense of justice. This was the theory of Plato regarding the natural law school. Plato wrote many good famous books in jurisprudence. Some of them are Republic, Apology, and Synopsium. Now let's move on to Aristotle. He was the student of Plato, but continuously for 20 years he rejected the theory of forms for Plato. He believes in forms, like he believed in forms, but not in the notion. What was the Plato's notion? I have just told you that it is like, please write it down in the comment box, and now we will proceed with it. So Plato said that the law is of an immutable nature, and Aristotle believed that every form is a form of something, and a form is propounded by a particular form and its attributes to a particular form. Like something is a form of something and it is propounded by a attribute of something. This is what the Aristotle have said. Now these were the three major exponents who lived in Rome, but there were two more exponents of the ancient period who lived in Greece, and they were Zeno and Cicero. Who was Zeno? So Zeno was a very wealthiest person, but he lost all of his wealth, and then he started reading Socrates. So he got interested, he got fascinated towards philosophy. Zeno founded Stoicism from Stoa Poikile. These are some typical Roman names, so I hope that I am pronouncing them right. So where he and his students were studying. So Stoa Poikile is a building where he and his students have studied, and they were doing their critical thinking, and his followers are also known as Stoics. So Zeno was the one, because of like Roman always interested, or they were very much intrigued towards the principle of Stoicism. You can also see that they have included this system in their legal system which they are practicing. So this was happened because of Zeno. Zeno was become very popular, and he was like major exponents you can see from Greece. Now Cicero was a Roman philosopher and a lawyer. He was a Roman philosopher and a lawyer, and he said that the highest reason implanted in nature which command what ought to be done and forbids the opposite. So this is like something that the highest reason implanted in nature which commands that what ought to be done and forbids the opposite. So here we end with the ancient theory. Now comes the medieval period. From 10th to 12th century, there were Catholics and Medievals who gave this theory. They gave the theological theory and departed from the orthodox theory of Christian's father. So they tried to be more logical and reasonable. At that time, there was one most prominent exponent of medieval era who was Saint Thomas Aquinas. He divided law into four categories: the law of God, the law which has been given to us by the God, the natural law that is revealed through reasons, divine law, the law of scripture, and human law, that is the man-made law. So he said that natural law is revealed through nature and it governs all the human beings in the world, and divine law means the law that interpreted by the church. So he gave the supremacy to the church and people have to abide by the church interpretation, and there were no reason through which they can oppose the laws that were interpreted by the court. Natural law had to be in the conformity with the human law, because if it became derogatory, then there will be no mean of human law. So this is what, like in this period, Saint Thomas Aquinas gave more importance towards the interpretation of church, and he has given immense power to the church. That's why I guess he is referred as a saint. Now comes the Renaissance period. This is the period which begins from 14th century and ends in 17th century. There were many developments in arts, music, poems during this period. So this period brings up with it the social contract theory. In this, society lives in a state of nature where there is no right and duties to anyone, and then they came together and form a social contract. So for example, X person has a right of reputation, so everyone has a duty to not harm the reputation of X person. There were three main exponents of this theory, of this school: Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. According to Thomas, a man always have a fear of death. In this nature, it is a horrible place to live. Like always, a man always been begging to another man to not kill him. So it is like that, you will not kill me and I will not kill you kind of a theory. So in this state, there was always been a fear of death. Like you can assume yourself that if such a situation is there, everyone will always be continuously be living in a fear that today or the another day or this moment or that moment I will got be killed. So, and Thomas Hobbes give immense power to the state. Like all these rights of all the human beings, I have told you that they are coming together and forming a contract. So all these rights and all these thing has been given to the state, and state have a power to control all the human beings, and they have enormous power, so they can use it as any way they wanted to use it. And then comes the John Locke. He focused on individualism and liberty. He gave importance to the property as well. Like before this, the John Hobbes was only focusing towards what? He was only focusing towards the body of a person, not towards the property. But John Locke said that no, property is also something which is important to a human being. So he focused on individualism and liberty. It is a duty of a sovereign to give, it is a duty of the sovereign to give protection to the property as well, right? So in this, John Locke also gave the right to protest to the human beings, right? Like if they feel that the government is not performing the functions properly, accordingly they also have a right to protest. And if still the situation is not better or it does not get better and the government does not start functioning properly, then they can overthrow the government. Now comes the Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Jean-Jacques Rousseau entered into a contract. He said that man enters into a contract in order to preserve the rights of equality and freedom. They surrendered their rights not to a single individual but to a community as a whole. Like I have mentioned here that the rights, the man enters into a contract, and he surrenders his right not just to a single human being but to a whole society. He brought up the theory of general will, the general will of a people. So you should obey what is the will of the people, but whose will? Like the will of the people, like the will of a community, like will of a group. Whose will? How are you going to decide that this is the will of the people? If you are going to use the voting system, then it will also lead to a huge chaos. So that's why this concept was not that relevant at that time. Now comes the modern period, the 19th century to 21st century. David Hume said that natural law says, because from this time we can see that the natural school of law was losing its essence and losing its relevancy with the time, right? So David Hume said that natural law says that values are inherent in nature, which is not true. The values and also the concept of justice varies a lot from place to place. So if there would have been a perfect complete system which can be discovered by a man, then there won't be any divergent interpretation of the law throughout the world. Then comes the Bentham. We are going to study Bentham and Austin into a different school. So here I'm just taking the gist, what was their approach in the modern period regarding the natural law. So Bentham also gives the concept of utilitarian theory, and Austin didn't believe in the natural rights. According to him, right, Austin was the person who had given the concept of command and all of these things, that if someone breaks up the law, you are supposed to give him a punishment, and like this. That was the mindset of Austin, because he was an army man, right? So that's what he had a thought in the mind, that if someone breaks up the laws, then it is necessary to punish him. So Austin didn't believe in natural rights. So according to him, all rights are created by state and enforced by the state, right? He didn't acknowledge the social contract theory, and he said that people did not consent to obey the state. The state forces them to obey the commands of the state, and commands of the state are law. In 20th century, there arose a need to revive the natural law, and society has a need, an ideal of justice. Now comes the criticism of natural law theory. The concept of morality is a varying content, right? It changes from time to time and place to place. Or we were discussing that it becomes eternal. It is always remains eternal. It is immutable in nature, but it is not something like. Things are different from society to society, from place to place, from country to country. For example, that adultery is an offense in India, whereas in Britain it is a civil wrong, right? So that's how the law changes from place to place, right? This is an example. Now the rule of morality in natural law is not amendable to change, but the legal rule do need a change. Like the natural law, the essence does not need a change, but the legal rule always need a change because of the society, because the arising needs of the society. Legal dispute may be settled by the law of courts, but the disputes relating to morality cannot be settled into a court. Because see, if I am seeing someone who is drowning, right, so it is not a duty which is imposed on me by the law to save that person, but it is a morality, right? So I cannot be punished by the law that I haven't saved that man, but morality is something which can punish me at that time, right? The moral proposition may not always necessarily confirm the need of the society. For example, giving a birth to a children may be a natural phenomenon, but it may not always be considered as an obligatory moral duty of man to conduct to his act. Now, let's talk about the contribution. So despite all of these shortcomings, we cannot deny the role that natural law school has played in interpretation of the law, right? and it is like that, because the change which is happening, and change is the nature, right? Change is the nature which we cannot deny. It happens with the time. So we cannot deny that natural law theory haven't done anything with the interpretation law, but it has given a very huge contribution. So with this, we end with this video. I would like to thank you for staying with me till the end of the video. If you feel that this video have add anything into your life, then please do like, share and subscribe to Law Minds. Thank you so much.